Kauffman, and we start with that we are not here to sell you anything. We are here to give you money.
Yay!
Hopefully that will make for a much more interesting presentation, or an interesting, I should say, presentation. We wanted to come in and talk to you guys about Petsmart Charities and the changes we've gone through over the last year. I'm sure a lot of you have followed the changes that have happened at Petsmart and at Petsmart Charities side. And so we thought it was a good idea to meet these coalitions because they tend to have, each state that has these coalitions tend to be very reputable and organized groups that get together and to meet and to discuss the problems in their state, in their region, whatever area they're in. And that's the exact target audience we want to reach to let you know where we've gone and what we're up to. So a little bit of background just on myself before we move forward. Again, my name is Steve Kauffman. I come from the shelter world, so I've been in your shoes for the last 25 years. The last 11, I was the director of the APA of Missouri in St. Louis, which was the second largest open admission shelter in St. Louis, Missouri. So in the past 25 years, I've worked at very small limited admission shelters, very large open admission, worked with government contracts, animal control contracts. So really the role that I'm in as Center of Excellence Manager, which my cohorts have unfortunately nicknamed COMA, as my acronym, is really not only to sort of bring the shelter experience into Petsmart Charities, but also help advocate for you guys. So, I know the experiences and the troubles and the trials and tribulations that you guys deal with in the rescue world and the shelter world. And as we have transitioned from program operators to strategic grant makers, which we'll get into as we move along, I can offer that insight into your world and the dialogue you use, the phrases, the acronyms. I mean, you guys know animal welfare is its own animal. So that's the position that they created for me to come in and help these grant makers with that process. So see how I am with technology here? Do I point this way? Okay. So a little history that I'm going to go over, the background of Petsmart Charities, and then Jenny is going to talk more about the grants and the opportunities for funding and resources that are out there. So I know you're all anxious to listen to her, so I'll go through mine pretty quick. Petsmart Charities and Petsmart Charities of Canada were established in 1994. The founders of Petsmart had a commitment that they were not going to sell dogs and cats in their stores, and so they dedicated space to the groups to come in and use the resource of all that foot traffic that comes into their stores to help bring your message to the public. So how it works on our side is Petsmart actually donates to us. We are a 501c3. We are not related to Petsmart, except that we are in the same office building. But they donate that space to us to work with you guys to bring in what we call AWOs, Animal Welfare Organizations, and bring you guys in to, again, be able to use our stores and that foot traffic to do adoptions and to spread your message. We are the largest funder of animal welfare in North America. There are a lot of funders out there. Last year we gave away about $31.1 million. We are on track in the next few years to hit the $50 million mark is what we're after. We have a lot of new stores going in the next few years. We get a large portion of our donations come from those pin pad donations that all of you and hopefully all your supporters are donating to, and we feel very proud and very responsible that we need to give all that money back to you. So we actually do it very efficiently with a 91.5% rating. So basically about 9 cents of every dollar donated is going to some administrative costs, but really all those donations that are coming in from the stores every single day are going right back into your hands. So there are a number of other funders, the ASPCA, Maddie's Fund, HSUS, Best Friends, Petco. They all do wonderful work. We do not feel like we're in any competition with them. So yes, maybe Petsmart and Petco have on the retail side, the Coke and Pepsi sort of feel, but on the mission side, we all recognize that we're here to save lives. We're here to put people and pets together. And so we work on some level with a lot of these other groups, and some of you might even work on project or national size projects where we're helping to fund things like HSUS Pets for Life and other more national programs that we're involved in as well. So there's no competition amongst us, and we're all friends, and a lot of those folks from these other groups are also from the sheltering world as well. So we tend to know each other. As you guys know in this field, we sort of pass people around, and they tend to work there, and then they worked over there, and then for a while they worked over there. So that happens in animal welfare as well. I've been with Petsmart Charities now since April, so I'm pretty new as well. Like I said, just coming in from the shelter world and just transplanted over to Phoenix, where our home office is, and then has started immediately hitting the road and meeting with all you guys. So again, 91.5% of our expenses go straight to the programs. We focus on our partners. Petsmart is a partner of ours. We consider them one of our largest donors, so we're very happy to work with them. The animal welfare organizations, or the AWOs, those are also our partners that we work with in store. And then our donors as well. And so our donors are, of course, Petsmart's a big donor, but then the general public's a giant donor as well, as they're giving the money through those pin pad donations. And as we build more stores and there's more registers, that's more money that goes right back into you. So that's our goal, is really, and again, as we get into the details of getting out of program operation and into grant making, we are just here now to give away money, to find people doing good things for animals and help fund them to do it better, or maybe even teach other people to do it better. So we have new leadership. Dr. David Haworth has come on board as our new president and CEO. David comes from the Morris Animal Foundation in Denver, Colorado. He is a PhD and a DVM. He has a lot of history in grant making and in thought leadership and strategic grant making. So he's really brought a nice, great vision forward on how we're going to move forward to sort of transition out of running programs and trying to sit in Phoenix and operate programs all over the country to really not just doing grant making, but strategic grant making. What's moving the needle? What's reducing euthanasia? What's increasing adoptions? We also, I don't have him up because he's newer than this slide is we've brought in Roger Hastings. Roger comes to us from the Animal Aid Foundation in Colorado, which was another granting organization that used to give away, still gives away about $1 million a year to groups in Colorado. And I'm sure you guys have followed on the national level. Colorado, similar to Seattle, is very progressive in what they're doing in animal welfare, and his foundation, the Animal Aid Foundation, is very vital in that area to helping reduce Denver's euthanasia rate. Our particular division is made up of Lindsay DeCaro is our program director, so she oversees the 5 of us. We have 4 regional relationship managers that have 3 assistant relationship managers that help them, and Jenny will speak after me, and she's the one that is your go-to person for all your grants on the West Coast. And she'll explain the West Coast as Petsmart geography as we move forward, but it really, this change that we've made allows you to not have to talk to multiple people to get funds. You can talk to one person and form a relationship with that person throughout the course of your whole granting opportunities, and as long as you're at that agency. It's always nice to have one point person instead of having to jump around because you want a TNR grant, then you want an adoption grant, but you also want to do an event, you've got some medical needs, and then you're doing a big impound. It's kind of hard to talk to all those different people, so now you've got sort of a one-stop shop with this new model. We also created 2 Center of Excellence managers. There's myself on the adoption side, again coming from the animal welfare world, and we also have a Center of Excellence manager for corporate relationships, because we do often work in cooperation with some other giant nonprofits or for-profit agencies that want to do things for nonprofits. So we have a person that directly works with those groups. So so we're going to talk a little bit about how we've gone, the change we went through. So Petsmart Charities has gone from the change from program operators to strategic grant makers. Maybe we'll go backwards, or we won't. There we go. So what does that mean? So we used to have one program that many of you might be familiar with, Rescue Wagon. That ring a bell to a couple of folks. So we had 11 years we were running Rescue Wagon. Had vans going all over the country, moving animals from the south up to the northeast and northwest. I've been visiting in the last couple of months a lot of shelters up in the northeast. They don't have animals. I mean, their shelters are empty. They're not only transporting dogs up, they're now transporting cats as well, which we didn't even think about 4 or 5 years ago, that cats would actually need to be transferred. There's agencies up there that would pay $50 a cat for you to transfer your cats up there because they know that they're getting adopted in an instant. And their shelters are really looking at the other services and programs they offer as more of a community center as opposed to just an adoption agency, because they've been so progressive, as I think a lot of Seattle, Portland, and the Northwest has as well. Very active in spay-neuter, very active in the PR and marketing of shelter pets, which has really helped shorten that average length of stay and get those animals out, and really set the trend that adoption is the first option, which is something we're very excited about. So Rescue Wagon was very expensive, and it was very difficult to run. And it was one of a lot of programs. We had TNR programs. We had program operators in Phoenix running programs all over the country and flying all over the place and making sure the programs were working well. And so when Petsmart got sold last year, one of the things that Petsmart Charities Board of Directors did is that during this transition from being a publicly traded company to a private company, we're going to look at charities as well and say, what's the focus of there and what are we doing? How successful are we doing it? And Rescue Wagon is a great example. In the sheltering world, there were a lot of shelters, mine included, that I was at in St. Louis, were doing transport without rescue wagon. We didn't need them. We had our own best practices. We had our own protocols and our own partners. And there's a lot of shelters that were doing that. And so one of the things that the board looked at is, if there are groups doing this and they're doing it well, how can we come in and say, well, you're not doing it right, you should do it like we do it. You should do it, and we're telling you how to do it. Whereas you're in the field, your feet, your boots to the ground, so you know best what's going on. And so there was a total shift in the sort of attitude of what Charities should be. And Charities is now completely strategic grant maker. So we no longer and will no longer operate any programs. I've stepped into that realm and started creating a program, and I got pulled way back pretty quick. That sounds like a program. We're not doing that. So what we do now is we travel around, we meet groups like yours, and listen, basically. What are you doing? What are you doing well? Could you do it better if we helped fund you? Could you teach somebody else to do it if we helped fund you? So, we're really looking at just the grant-making side now.
I'm sorry to step in so early, but I just have a quick question. Obviously, there was a catalyst for the large change that happened at Petsmart. Could you speak to that for a moment? Because I'm curious about what the catalyst was.
At Petsmart or Petsmart Charities?
Charities, I'm
At
sorry.
Charities?
Yeah.
I don't know if I can directly answer that. I don't know what drove them to decide, besides financially looking at it and going, the rescue wagon example is the biggest example that when I came in, I took over the tail end of sunsetting rescue wagon, and that was the one that said, look, it cost $11 million to run this program over these years. Wouldn't it be better if we just gave it to them? And I think bringing in David and bringing in Roger, both from the strategic grant-making background, are starting to look forward. When you look at the Northeast and the Northwest and that reduction of animals that are available for adoption, it started to really come to play of, are we the smartest? Do we even want to be the smartest ones in the room? We're not. And it's sort of conceded for us to say, you should do it our way, and if you do, we'll give you money for it. You're doing it better, and you've got more experience doing it. So I think that attitude shift was with that leadership shift as well, that let's really look at what's going to start moving the needle. If we fund the same program over and over again for 10 years, and it's helping your one agency, but did something change? Are there less cats? Are there less dogs? Are you doing more adoptions? Is there less disease? It's really starting to focus on the strategic side. And so we've got, and as the largest funder, we gave away $31 million and looking to give away $50 million. You can move a needle with $50 million. So we looked at it and thought, we don't have a lot of resources. We have one resource, actually, money. It's a good resource. It's not a bad resource to have, but it's a big responsibility to make sure that we're giving it away appropriately into groups that are using it to actually do something that's helping their community move forward and reducing euthanasia, increasing adoptions, and really also we've expanded, and Jenny will hit on this, increasing the human-animal bond. That's another category that we've added that we'll expand upon later, but that's just a huge direction that our field is moving into, a lot of human-animal bond programs that you guys are creating, and we don't want to create those programs and we don't want to run those programs. We think that you're better at it. So I don't know what facilitated the initial, was it the sale initially of PetSmart that did it, or did something else kick that off? Because that was all before I got there. But I do recognize that the logic behind the rescue wagon sunsetting and coming from a shelter that was transport, we had 19 transport partners in southern Missouri, didn't need rescue wagon, and rescue wagon would have been a great, Petsmart Charities, I should say, would have helped me fund what I was doing better, but they already were running that program, and I think that's part of that catalyst of what drove that.
Thank you.
So, move on to, so one of the things we did change that I touched on just a little bit there is our mission statement, which used to be to find lifelong loving homes for all pets. But we've added a couple really thoughtful lines in there, and for those of you that know mission statements, you know that people agonize over every word in a mission statement. So every word was dissected in this mission statement before they came up with, by supporting programs and thought leadership that bring people and pets together. So that helped widen and broaden the categories that we can fund. So it's not just adoptions, it's not just the in-store programs. There's a lot of programs that are being created in those progressive areas and everywhere. I shouldn't just, give all the credit to the Northeast and the Northwest. A lot of people are coming up with great programs, but that whole idea of the thought leadership, what's advancing the mission and advancing the cause, as well as bringing people and pets together, that opens up a lot of categories that we can fund that get into more support dogs and service dogs, PTSD situations, and those type of ideas.
We had a pilot grant from you for our community cat program when we set it up in 2014. Are you still going to look at community cats? Because that's not really a pet.
Yes, we are. And there's the specifics of these grants that I'll let Jenny go through, but yeah, we still have that in our funding categories.
Thank you.
Yep. And definitely feel free to jump in because it's all, open forum here, and I don't want you to forget anything either, so I don't mind at all. So how do we, on the adoption side, how do we work with our AWO partners? So we help save about 1,300 lives every day at a PetSmart. 7 million pets, we just hit our 7 millionth. We count those as adoptions that happen in the store. So those aren't ones that you might have seen and then gone back to the shelter, or you found some other location. If it happened in the store, we count it. And that number is growing quicker and quicker. So getting 1 million to 2 million took us a long time. 2 to 3 took a little shorter because we were building more stores. 4 to 5 got shorter. So we're looking at 8 million coming up in the next few years as we expand more stores and more opportunities for you guys to bring those pets in, and again, reach an audience that you might not have been able to get into your shelter, or if you don't have brick and mortar, it's the chance to reach that audience. Over 500,000 pets helped every year, and we've helped fund 1.4 million spay-neuter surgeries. So, we're community cats, spay-neuter, those are all big picture and adoptions. Those three are sort of that core of animal sheltering, that when you're looking at the wheel and the spoke idea of everything that it takes to help reduce euthanasia and increase visibility, those aren't going away, and those are the core. All we've done is expand. We've tried not to contract it all and get rid of any other things that we were funding in the past. So we have actually that's low now. We have over 1,400 stores. We're getting close to 1,500 stores. Every store has a dedicated space called a 7-day cat center. So those 7-day cat centers are where groups can come in and leave their cats there. Ideally, they're adopted in 7 days, but sometimes we recognize they take longer, and people do rotate those animals through. These originally started, if you look in the upper right, as a Love a Pet Center. That's the early 1994 rendition of the idea that have now turned into what's called an everyday adoption center. So we have 22 of these around the country. The closest one here, I believe, is Spokane. And that is an actual shelter inside a store. So I don't know if have you ever visited an actual EAC versus a 7-day cat center? So these are shelters with full kennel runs, small dogs, large dogs, the same plumbing systems and the same cleaning systems that you guys use in the shelter world. They hold anywhere from, the larger ones hold 40 to 50 animals. The smallest one I've seen was about 25 animals. But it's really a great way that, especially in areas where they're still dealing with overpopulation, that it takes some of that pressure off the shelter on the space issue. There are still shelters that euthanize for space and time. And by having these everyday adoption centers, it's yet another outlet where they can sort of relieve that pressure. And again, I can't say this enough, it puts you in front of an audience that you might not have ever seen in your building for whatever reason. And we've studied those over and over in the shelter world. Why aren't you coming? It's too depressing. I want to take them all home. Sometimes the buildings themselves, if you look at the older style government buildings, aren't very attractive to come into. Love all the new designs that are out there and the new features, but we recognize that sometimes you can reach a much broader audience that way.
And the cat center, is that staffed by the rescue specifically, and then the everyday adoption center is PetSmart staff?
Nope, they're both completely run by the Animal Welfare Organization. So the 22 everyday adoption centers we have, they staff them the same way that you would staff. You have 2 employees there, they do their own adoptions. The 7-day cat centers, we leave it up to the groups. So most of the groups train the staff at PetSmart to do adoptions for them when they're not there, and then they just have some sort of method put aside where they put the money in the safe and they transport it, or, transfer the money to the appropriate person.
We used to do that with the store, but we had trouble with the turnover at the stores, and then a manager would come in that didn't like cats, and then all of a sudden they're like asking us if they're supposed to feed the cats, and I'm like,
This type of cat you have to feed every day, right?
so that's good to know that you allow the staff to be trained, and that is part of that, because that is important to us specifically.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things when I talked earlier about the regional relationship manager sort of being your one-stop shop, with the position they created with me, I'm that one person that if you had a problem between the store leadership and the animal welfare organization, that's where I can step in. And having come from your background, I can really, I don't want to say defend because I'm there to be impartial, but sort of mediate between those discussions and make sure, because for me, the bottom line is animal care. We know that it all comes down to stress reduction. You got high stress, you got low immune system, they get sick. So the whole goal is to keep the stress down of these cats. They seem to break the quickest. So it's stressful when they're not getting cleaned at a consistent basis, or they're not getting fed on a consistent basis. So that's all stuff that I've done a few of these where we've met coalitions, and you're not the first to come up with some of those concerns between leadership and the AWO. And I've got a bunch of business cards here. You're welcome to take them. If there's ever any problem, let me know, and I'll help immediate pet. So yeah, they'll feed them, they'll clean them. You are required at least once a week to come
Yeah,
and make sure that they're
and
okay.
that we would expect, but
Yeah.
every day for our group was not realistic.
Right, and it's not for, there's not every group's got 300 fosters and volunteers just that are free 9 to 5 every day, so we recognize that.
Yeah.
That's why we want to train our staff.
So the one that I saw in Arizona, it had the store manager sort of oversaw it, and then they had a volunteer base that did everything within it, and it housed about 25 animals. Do they still do that?
Was that, which store in Arizona?
I want to say Surprise.
So that was probably a cat center, not an everyday
No,
adoption?
they had dog runs too.
Oh, they had dog runs too,
Yeah.
okay. So one of the things, and I'm sort of glad you brought this up, that we are just learning, and I'm learning new in this position, we had in a number of stores these dedicated dog centers. Didn't know they existed. So they are areas in the back that were similar. No, it's been great. In fact, we are on a hunt right now, and I'm trying to talk to 1,500 stores. It's been a challenge, but to find out where are these, because I think they're being underutilized, and there are groups that could utilize dog kennels. The 7-day cat centers are great, and cats tend to be cat spickles as well. I mean, that's where our overpopulation tends to focus. But if we find stores that have these dedicated dog centers, my job would be, let's get some groups in there. Let's get some
Well,
dogs in there.
they dedicated 2 runs to a bunch of different organizations, and every week you're taking new dogs down there. It was an awesome operation.
Oh, good, wonderful. So, I'll look into that one. I just found one in my own backyard in Phoenix as well, in Tatum and Shea. So there's like, wow, we didn't even know it's here. It's in our own backyard. So, and to sort of reference that, I don't want to go too far backwards, but we're all new at Charities. I mean, Charities, when we say it turned over, it turned over. There's, I think, 4 that stayed from the previous. And the previous group did wonderful work. I mean, they were experts at what they were doing. It's just our direction changed, and with that direction change, brought in new people too. So there's around 32, 35 of us, I think now, altogether, and there's only 4 from the past. And a lot of our groups, we have our strategic, our regional relationship managers and myself within the animal welfare world. But we have, CPAs and attorneys, and we're moving a lot of money. So there's a lot of accountability that has to happen when you're moving that much money around. So it's a difficult operation. There's something that's, it's been the most fun I've ever had in my life, from shelter world to being able to go and, help facilitate moving some of that money to you guys. But I recognize how difficult that is to attract, nearly $50 million in the next upcoming years. So yeah, the dedicated dog centers, to get back to that, if you ever see me, take my card and let me know which store you were at, so that I can go, hey, let's get some groups in there and move some dogs, get some dogs adopted. So we have about 3,800 partners. We're trying to meet them all. It's been very difficult, but we travel a lot. So it says must be a nonprofit with current 501c3 status, but we also do work with municipalities, which is why I was very interested in coming here, just because it was the Washington Federation of Animal Control Agencies. I'm glad that there are nonprofits here as well, but we were at the National Animal Control Conference that was up here a month ago too, and I think there's a real lack of municipalities knowing that they can apply for grants as well. And that's something Jenny can speak to too. So for those of you in municipalities, there are opportunities for funding out there. And our adoption partners range in size, capability, and area of focus. So we've got very small groups that might do 50 or a couple hundred adoptions a year, and we've got very, very large groups that do thousands. We have 5 EACs in Texas. One of them with Dallas Animal Services, Dallas Animal Control, they do over 2,200 adoptions just at the EAC. We have a partner in Yuma, Arizona, that does more adoptions in the EAC than they do at their shelter. They just built a new shelter. It's like a new $3 million, it's a beautiful place. It's just in the middle of nowhere, and people don't know where it is. So they actually end up doing more adoptions out of the store than they do at their own shelter. Not by much, it's about 1,500 versus 1,400, but it still sort of shows that this is an audience that you might not have been able to reach on your own, and that's sort of that benefit of working with a large retailer like this. And so this is my last slide, but this sort of shows the 7-day cat centers. So the 7-day cat centers over the years have gone through different designs. I am very, very happy that I'm now on the design team for the other ones, because the new ones, these were all designed more from the Petsmart Inc. side, which is how many can we fit in this area. I know that cats are vertical, dogs are horizontal, cats like to go up and down, so we're designing these with a lot more of, oh, I have a laser, but a lot more of these spaces, so the cats can actually free roam, the sort of condo method, instead of just the kennel areas. We have, of course, portalized every single kennel that we have out there in our 7-day cat centers, so we do allow them to be able to go back and forth. They have a separate, what we call, sort of bedroom and bathroom area, so the public doesn't have to see that. But this design is even an older design now. We're actually moving forward with a new design that's going to incorporate even more space for these cats to be able to go vertical and to go up and down.
Is there a way to apply to get your local Petsmart to upgrade? their pet center.
Yeah.
We're still working on the old stainless steel.
Yeah, so the oldest designs are a glass room with a
Yeah,
door
yeah.
and a bunch of shorelines across the back, and that's
Yep.
probably what you're talking about, yeah. So I'm working on that, but as they're building new stores, they're putting the new designs in. We don't have much of a say on the ink side. In fact, we can't do anything to drive traffic to ink, and that's a clear distinction that I don't think a lot of people recognize. Is as a 501c3, we can't do anything that would drive traffic to the for-profit company. So you won't see us ever give out like grooming gift cards or gift cards to go shop at PetSmart, because that would be us giving, giving them preference, and we're not supposed to do that. So it is a real clear distinction. They do donate this stuff to us. They can donate as much as they want to us. We like that. And we're happy to give it away. But if you did a big impoundment of 50 dogs that needed some really serious grooming, we couldn't offer you grooming for free. We could offer you a grant and say, you're welcome to use PetSmart, but you could also go to any other groomer you wanted after that. So, not even the answer to your question, but roundabout, I'm trying to get to them all. What I'm really trying to do is take those old cat centers and help people utilize them better to promote their business. So I think what's happened is, we all know that you guys do the mission very, very well. You know how to place animals, you know how to screen homes and get them into homes. But I think people sometimes forget about the business side of nonprofit. It's a mission-based business. And so, again, it comes back to being visible in front of people you might not have been visible in front of before. Those people could be donors. So how do you utilize that space to help promote what you're doing as opposed to just adoptions? So I think those spaces offer a lot of real estate to be able to put up different signage, and I'm working with Inc. to make sure that you are allowed to put those up. But those are real, I'm working with those old styles to more help the business side of, we've got a capital campaign, here's our big annual fundraiser coming up, how do we help you guys promote that stuff? Good questions.
Understanding again the distinction, do you know if there's going to be any conversations between the charities and Inc. about the selling of all the other kinds of animals?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Yeah, the small mammals and everything. The one policy that we did change this year that I think is a benefit to the rabbit groups, I don't know if there's any House Rabbit Society folks here or not, is we now encourage and not only allow but encourage those groups to use our habitats for those animals for adoption. So instead of bringing rabbits in and putting them in an X-pen or in a crate, you can actually use the commercial habitats we have, put up your adoption sign and your logo of your group, and use those to house those animals.
3 of your PetSmart stores take our rabbits.
Oh, wonderful.
We adopt out 200 rabbits a year.
Oh, great.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful. In fact,
So right now, 200 of them are rabbits.
I'll think about it. Still, I'm gonna get the short end of the stick all the time.
they do, and they're highly relinquished and then not thought of again. And so we had a really big push this year just on the rabbit side. The small mammals, I can't speak to that, which direction they're going to go, but we are always trying, because we are mission-based. So anything we can do to adopt, we would rather adopt than sell. So we've allowed birds, large birds, to get adopted. Basically, if it's a companion animal, we're happy to help you adopt it in the store. Now, we've had some requests like skunks. We don't have skunks to be adopted. There was one in Florida that wanted to do some alligators. We were like, no alligators in the store. They were friendly though, but no. But if it's companion and you can prove to me it's really a companion and not just your alligator that you can pet, then yeah, we're happy to help you get those adopted in the store.
Can I ask you a question about that? Just playing devil's advocate for those that are letting PetSmart, which I'm sure it's wonderful, sell their animals. We've had experience with the local store in my community asking us to do that. But if you folks aren't associated with the PetSmart store and say a rescue partner has an issue with a store employee, and in this case we had a very nice manager at our local store ask if they could take our small animals, and I explained to him our concern that they didn't necessarily have the same philosophical
Sure.
adoption policy, and he explained to me that they did, and they screened everybody so well. So I got off the phone and handed $40 to our youngest admin person and said, go to PetSmart, don't say anything except you're a college student named Tiffany, you just
Right.
moved into the dorms and you want to buy an animal, and she came back 10 minutes later with a guinea pig.
Right.
So I called the manager back and said, I've got good news and bad news here, buddy.
Yeah.
And
Secret shopped him and
yeah.
So, yeah.
So if something like that happens though, and you guys don't oversee, who do we take those concerns to if we are deciding to be a partner?
Sure, you can still take them to me. So I work with, while we don't answer to Inc., we do work closely with Inc. So there is a person on the corporate side that is an operations person directly related to adoptions, and I work very closely with him as well. So he handles those store leader and store employee issues, and I handle more of the AWO and animal welfare issues. But we meet regularly. So these issues come up pretty frequently, and I recognize we have a lot of turnover in our stores. It's a great starter job for a lot of people, and it's, you want to get into animals, and you might not have started at a shelter or a rescue yet. So you might work with somebody that's been there for a long time, and that person leaves or gets transferred or goes to another store. I want to make sure the relationship is still there with that store. So I work very closely with the operations guy that handles adoptions to make sure they're saying what they're supposed to be saying, and they're staying up with the ethics of what we do. I think ethics and integrity is one that sort of sometimes gets lost over the course of, there's just a lot of opinions in animal welfare of what those mean. So we just want to make sure food, water, shelter, vet care, socialization, these are companion animals, the 5 freedoms that we talk about a lot. We're here to make sure, on the charity side, to make sure all those are being met. And if they're not on the Inc. side, I've got some point person to go to.
Thank you.
I want to be clear, my experience wasn't bad with you guys. Just, it's not you,
That's good.
Yeah,
But I do
yeah.
like to hear the bad ones because, what I don't want to get into, or I would hate to get into, is that we do give away a lot of money, and sometimes people are afraid to say, well, I don't want to tell them anything because, would this affect my funding at all? And I'm forming a relationship, and I don't want to just complain the whole time. Tell me, that is exactly what I'm here for, is to make that road smoother for you guys. And if I don't hear it, then I think everything's going well.
So I have a question about breed-specific legislation. One of the things that Petsmart has done very well, Petsmart Charities has done very well for a very long time, is focus on some of the at-risk groups. And you mentioned it earlier, chihuahuas, pit bulls, cats, and feral cats,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
One of the largest barriers that people face with, because of the improvement of the relationship people have with pit bulls, generally all over the United States, one of the largest barriers they continue to face is breed-specific legislation. You continue to bring up Colorado and Denver in your conversation, but clearly there's a huge disconnect there in the progressiveness of that state, because the largest city that they have has breed-specific legislation.
Right.
So I'm wondering if there's any thought that's gone behind some of the changes that Petsmart Charities is doing to address some of the breed-specific legislation issues that are facing all of ours in animal welfare and the shelters that surround those areas.
Sure. So in Miami too, that's the other
Correct.
big area. So we can't lobby, as a 501c3.
Right.
So we don't get to make the rules for Inc. So I know that there are some constrictive rules around pit bulls just on the Inc. side as well.
Yep.
We can continue, and as a new group coming in, especially with our new leadership, where the focus of this new leadership is thought leadership, and it's not just handing out grants, it's or running programs, it's doing things for a purpose. Why are we doing it? What's the logic behind why we're doing it? So while I can't guarantee absolutely anything as far as changes being made, I think that having a thought leadership mentality as we go forward is going to help when we have those conversations. We can't really lobby Denver or Miami to change their laws at all, but we can convince our stores, ideally, of what we feel on the charity side is appropriate, and then they can make their decisions. Their decisions are probably, and again, I don't want to speak too out of turn, probably made through legal more than they are made through mission-based policy, unfortunately. So,
But there's information that supports the fact that treating dogs anything other than individuals is not legally sound either,
Yeah.
unfortunately, right?
right. Yeah, so it's, that's an Inc. battle that we can continue to, with our new direction, push, here's what we feel, and at our board meetings and in those regular meetings, we can say, this is how we feel, this is why we feel this way.
Sure.
I'm not sure how far we'll get with it, but it's a whole new,
Little bit at a time.
little bit of time. We're a whole new animal, so we're trying.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So, so Petsmart Charities and Petsmart sort of are two very, very different entities, even more so now that you've had these big changes. How, for lack of a better term, how married are we to Petsmart to participate in Petsmart Charities? How obligated are we? I feel a sense of obligation to show up for all their adoption events,
Right.
and it's sort of being presented that way. And so, it's like, if you want this, you gotta do this, and it's not that we don't wanna do that, I
Sure.
just wonder if it's actually a policy or is it just a personal belief?
Yeah, no, I think that's not a policy at all, and I'll let Jenny speak more to that, but you do not have to be an in-store adoption partner to get grants through Petsmart Charities, and that is not weighted when you're doing that,
Should
so.
be. Okay, good.
Yeah, so, again, we'll get into more detail on the money side. It's kind of funny, I love this position, coming from animal welfare and then coming to a side where we're giving money away. I don't actually give any money away, and when I go to these SAWA and HSUS, I always like, she's the one that gives the money away. I love the animal welfare side, I love listening to the stories, and then when the ask comes, I'm like, whoa, where's that? So she can address that for sure. But yes, we offer a lot of grants out there for people that are, or agencies that are not in-store adoption partners. And so, Jenny?
Yes.
Jenny, are you gonna be at SAWA in Portland?
I will, yes.
Okay, so if we
I think our
have
whole
more
team will.
extensive questions, we can come and invite you there.
Yes, yes, and I think we can stick around for a few minutes after too, if you guys have more, my specific program is X, Y, Z, is this a fit or not, those types of questions. But yes, so I am the lucky person that gives money away in the West region. My background is not in animal welfare. I've been learning a lot since I joined Petsmart Charities in February, and Steve has been an excellent resource for us as we continue to absorb that industry-specific knowledge. But my background is in corporate giving, philanthropy, grant making, 12 years with regional and national grants based with broadband technology, telecommunications, environmental sustainability, and other areas. So it's really great to see these grant making skills sort of applied in a new direction. I'm really, really excited and loving my new role. There's a lot of great energy with our new Petsmart Charities team, and a lot of great things that have come about as a result of all of this transition, and the expansion of our mission has allowed us to create new funding categories that I think you guys will also be very excited to hear about. So, this is clearly, as someone in Petsmart Inc. needs to retake geography, because my region is Minnesota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, on over. So this shift from a program operator to a strategic grant maker led to this regional relationship manager structure. So you have one point of contact for all of your grant opportunities were regionally based. This is also in alignment with Petsmart Inc.'s super regions. So that's why we align the geography this way. It does really break out based on population density. We each have 500 stores. We each have a relative number of AWO partners, and we offer the same types of funding across the country and Canada. We're just regionally structured now. So as a result of the expansion of our mission, so we went from lifelong loving home for all pets to now lifelong loving home for all pets by supporting programs and thought leadership that bring people and pets together. We have structured our funding into 4 different pillars or categories, if you will. And I'll do a deeper dive on each one of these pillars, but in general, the first one, keeping pets from entering the system, this is prevention, right? So intake diversion programs, programs that are keeping families in transition together with their pets, and spay and neuter is a huge focus for this first pillar. The second one, assisting pets in the system. So this is building capacity for shelters to provide care. So capacity building funding, this is where adoptions lives. We do a lot of support for adoptions, obviously, with our in-store adoption programs and more. And are really expanding on what we can do with shelter improvement grants. Looking forward, sort of 2017 facing, that's a category that you'll see opening. Enhancing the human experience through pets. So this is focused on building on that human-animal bond, recognizing that that's really a unifier, and that people's lives through pets is something that, we feel is very important. We're creating a lot of new programs that support that human-animal bond. For example, therapy dogs, companion animals, things of that nature that allow individuals individuals with disabilities to have their life improved as a result of having a pet. And then emergency relief is going to continue to be a always open category of funding for us. So this is disaster relief, be it man-made or natural. So to talk a little bit more about our intake diversion pillar, this is where spay and neuter grants live. On my next slide, we'll go a little bit more into what's currently being offered in our portfolio of spay and neuter grants. Intake diversion, so things like starting to look at programs for building kenneling facilities in homeless shelters so that families or individuals experiencing homelessness don't have to live in their car because they don't want to surrender their pet, or they don't go seek services simply because they don't want to surrender their pet. They'll be able to be united with them. Same type of philosophy applies to domestic violence shelters, building kenneling facilities in domestic violence shelters so that potential victim isn't staying behind for fear of what happens to her pet if she leaves this abusive relationship. So that's the type of thing that we're looking at for intake diversion. We've also done things like, hey, we'll fund a phone bank if you want to provide individuals with alternatives to surrendering their pet. Behavior programs for animals, maybe they just need a little bit of behavior help to prevent them from coming into the system. I don't personally like that word describing it, just the system being the shelter system. And then, obviously spay and neuter is going to be a huge category for us. Spay and neuter is open now on our website if you haven't had the chance to go on. We have taken the mystery away from it. It's not an invitation-only specific, link that you get only one time a year. It's on our website right now for spay and neuter grants. So the three categories of spay and neuter funding that are currently available are spay and neuter grants for owned pets. So this is targeted, subsidized funding for owned pets. Free roaming cat, so TNR grants are currently open on our website. And then clinic equipment grants. So if you're thinking of building a new spay and neuter clinic, be it bricks and mortar or a mobile clinic, there's an application for that. It's a little bit more detailed than the other two, but it's certainly out there and available right now until our 2016 money is gone. So we're on a fiscal year. We start again with a whole new pot of $31.1 million on February 1. And we'll also be opening, the plan is to open another spay and neuter grant cycle in the spring of 2017. So if you aren't able to get it in or be considered for funding this time around, don't worry. Wanted to give a little bit more detail on when you're going through the applications. If you've applied for funding from us in the past for spay and neuter, the application will look a little bit different. It will be less intense on your part. We've lifted the burden of application, taken a lot of detailed requirements out of that as it relates to specific demographics, area of need, targeted information, so that it's easier for you to apply and easier for you to explain your program, what works for your program in your community for your target area. So we're trying not to drive your programs for grant making. So the application is streamlined. The reporting will also be streamlined when it comes through. We don't want anybody spending hours and hours and hours of their day tracking information that's put into the report that we probably honestly won't read.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I just want to
sure I understand this. So it sounds like in the past, the requirements have been very restrictive, and which is quite frankly, a lot of organizations don't even bother, because it was so restrictive. Our organization tried and failed because it was so restrictive. Are you saying that's opened up now so that it's, like we were restricted to one zip code, and it just wasn't feasible to spend the money in that one zip code, and believe me, we did every marketing thing you can imagine. So has that piece of it opened up?
Yeah, we're still looking for you to target a specific area, for sure. You know where there are a lot of pets. You know where the lower income areas are. You know where there's a larger percentage of unaltered pets. We are not going to be that prescriptive down, to a certain area. It will still be a competitive process. So certainly, we receive many more applications for funding than we could possibly support, but we're looking for you all to define your program and tell us about your program design and what results you realistically think you can achieve and make an impact in your certain target area. So we're putting things like this in general. We'll support large-scale spay and neuter grants that we'd like to see 500, but we're not restricting it to be a 500, altered pet goal. And in general, we're looking at 12-month terms for our spay and neuter funding. But if your program just knocks our socks off and could not exist without being a 2-year program or a 6-month program or whatever you think your organization can achieve, we're not going to dismiss. So yes, everyone can go on our website. That's open right now along with our in-store adoption partner and our emergency room. Those 3 links are hopefully easier to find now when you just go on the animal welfare professionals tab. And we're still in process, just as a side note and a related note, of updating our Petsmart Charities website, taking things that maybe aren't applicable anymore, like we're not going to be running programs, we're not going to be conducting webinars, that type of stuff. So bear with us, it's a work in progress. Okay, so the second pillar to touch on, this is shelter management, transport, conferences, and training. All of those things are capacity building programs that organizations can take advantage of. These are going to be, again, remember 2017 and forward facing new programs, but things like shelter improvement capital grants. There will be resources for shelter improvements. Some organizations have multi-million-dollar capital campaigns. We'll engage with those. We'll also be able to engage with the little smaller groups who maybe just need to replace some kennels in order to go from like okay to great. So we're going to be looking at things off scale. And then transport, Steve mentioned, we recognize this, and it's been really interesting to me coming in with fresh eyes in animal welfare. Transport is going to be sort of a big spoke in the wheel, but it's only a spoke in the wheel of solving animal welfare. So we want to make sure that we are enabling groups to transport animals in a safe, appropriate manner, making sure they're following the proper guidelines and protocol, but things like vehicles would fit into this funding category for transport. And then conferences and training. We'll probably continue to support a lot of the larger conferences and consider some of the smaller ones as it makes sense for the community and the resources we have. So our third pillar, this is enhancing the human experience through pets. This is obviously near and dear to our hearts with adoptions. I'll share a little bit more about our in-store adoption program, but doing everything we can to find forever homes for pets is still very, very much core to our mission and our values. Capacity building, again, same types of themes. I kind of mentioned shelter improvement organizations that, are just needing capital to build capacity. Staffing has been floated as being supported in this area. Sometimes, need people to run programs, and we get that. So that's something that in this pillar we would have appetite to potentially support. And then enhancing the quality of life through pets. So this is programs that, a deployed servicemen might be able to have foster for their pets when they are deployed and then come back and be reunited with their pets. Working with groups like Canine Companions for Independence. So they raise service dogs for disabled individuals, and Petsmart Inc. used to support a lot of those types of programs, like the pet therapy dogs, children's hospitals. We support Seattle Children's Hospital. Actually was here last month and got to take a tour of that hospital and learn about that program and see the direct impact that pets were having on the patients in the hospital. It was really cool. I mean, just huge smiles on the kids' faces, and obviously makes a difference. So we want to be able to have a way to support that and grow that as we continue to grow the available amounts of funding that we have. Every time we open a new store, that's another pinpoint register that we can grow our dollars. So being able to expand into these new areas of that funding is really exciting. And then emergency relief. I know many of you in this room have probably worked with us in the past on emergency relief. So this is disaster relief, both on the man-made and the natural disaster scale. We have deployed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars this year. Most recently, the Hurricane Matthew. We did a lot with the fires in Canada earlier this year. Flooding in Louisiana. I mean, we invested $250,000 in just relief efforts in Louisiana, supporting those groups who are impacted. Basically, cleared the shelters and put them all on transport. A lot of them came, up this way.
Yeah.
They're not.
Hands.
Yeah. So that is, as long as we live in this world, there will be disasters, probably of both types. So we'll continue to be a resource for that. And on the man-made disasters, sadly, we see just as much with hoarding and cruelty as we do see need on the natural disaster side. So when your groups are aiding in a hoarding situation, or you're pulling a large number of pets, or minimum is 20 or more pets that are impacted as a result of a hoarding or a cruelty situation, we can provide grants to give you resources to care for those pets. And in many cases, if it happens after the fact, you didn't know it happened, and now you have 30 dogs to care for, we can also reimburse for the medical side of things. So spay and neuter for all of those pets, medical needs, within reason. Providing reimbursement for that is really an important thing that all of you guys probably touch at some point. So we'll continue to offer that, as I said, open application at any time on our website.
Jenny, last year, the year before, some of our members and other agencies in Eastern Washington were hit by wildfires. They were really struggling with caring for horses. Is that something that Petsmart Charities also assists with the disaster side?
Yeah, it breaks my heart every time I have to answer that question because I'm a horse lover and horse person, but through Petsmart Charities' definition of companion animal, horses aren't something that, we would typically provide adoption and support for through our in-store adoption partner program. So fortunately, we don't directly aid equine relief efforts, but we will always direct somebody else. If we get that call, we will send it over to HSUS or ASPC, some other local partner in the area who could potentially fill that need. So as I said, I'd touch a little bit more on our in-store adoption partner program. This is for anyone who might be considering becoming an in-store adoption partner. Reminder of some of the rewards that we have. We do $10 per pet for each pet adopted, comes right back to your organization. We provide food, litter, maintenance supplies, help with cleaning, help with, staff. They are trained to do adoptions, and your group wants to work with our associates to conduct adoptions. If you can't be there, that's a resource that we offer to our adoption partners. You're eligible to apply for event grants if you want to do an on-site event at Petsmart locations. There's another slide that speaks a little bit more specifically about that as a benefit. And then, other promotional programs that your partner can be eligible to participate in. Just a side note on this, we do screen and make sure that we're partnering with good, reputable in-store adoption partners, because we know, right, we've inherited more than 3,000 of these, that there are some groups that maybe perform at a different standard or a different level of care or capacity to care for their animals. So we're making sure that we're doing our due diligence now, both when we're onboarding a new partner and we're going back and maybe meeting other approved partners for the first time, that we're conducting detailed site visits before they can come into our stores, so that we can evaluate their capacity to care for animals. So we're making sure that everyone is held to the same standards and is accountable for how they treat the animals in their care, as a reflection of Petsmart Charities and what we want our brand to look like. So everyone has to be healthy, vaccinated, sterilized, and motivated in order to be in our store. Adoption event grants. I think this is one of the most underutilized grant categories that we have. So a lot of people don't know, if you want to do a large adoption event at Petsmart location, you can apply for grant funding, and we will do marketing. You can get radio remote, you can get advertising, we'll pay for boosted social campaigns. We can get you a tent if it's going to be hot, a tent if it's going to be cold, right? You can set up crates and containment. You can purchase crates and containment through this grant that you could use for not just that one event, but then every other weekend you want to go to PetSmart. We can also provide support. We recognize volunteers are kind of your lifeblood. You need to keep your volunteers happy in order to keep them coming back. So water, pizza, reimburse them for their gas. Those small things can often make a big difference. So yes, the only thing we don't fund in general for our adoption event grants is preparing pets for adoption. So spay and neuter, we can't. We just don't have the resources to spay and neuter every pet, but certainly welcome you to take advantage of that. And if you want to do an event grant, just talk to your store leader, who's your partner, and that person can submit an internal request that then initiates that application to be emailed to you. Yes.
How large of an adoption event would you qualify for this kind of event?
Yeah, so minimum of 20 is your goal for being adopted. I recognize in some markets you can bring 20 pets, like maybe here, and then all 20 go home. In other states, maybe they have to bring more to the event in order to hit that realistic goal, but that's the minimum. And you can collaborate with other groups if you want to pool your resources and pool your pets to get to that number. That's okay. We just ask that that's the minimum. And then the size of the grant is somewhat scalable to the number of pets that your adoption goal will be. You need more resources in order to adopt a larger number of pets.
Does the other group, if you collaborate, do they have to already be an approved installer?
Yes.
What if you don't make your goal? What if your goal is 20 and you have online adoption?
So there is a impact report that will be required at the end of the grant, so you tell us how you did. Did you hit goal? Did you not? If you didn't, why? If it's a good reason, it won't negatively impact your chances to get a future grant. If you have a poor impact report, just like any other type of our grant, we do look at those impact reports as sort of an evaluation tool for us to figure out, was it a successful investment? How well did the grant perform? Were you able to do what you said you could do? That's how. Any more questions? Okay. So again, lovely text. We just announced our 2017 National Adoption Weekend event dates. So if you have to have in-store adoptions during those specific time frames, we're also doing stipends. So if you do from 5 to 10, you get $150 one-time stipend. If you do 10 to 15, you get $250. 15, 20, you get $500 just for participating in national adoption. So local stores in their area. Here are the 2 district managers for the Petsmart stores in Washington, Seattle area. So Chad does North Seattle in Alaska, and Todd does South Seattle. Drop their names down. I'm sure they would love to have a call with you if they love having our in-store adoption partners, and are always on the hunt for recruiting new ones that are good ones that you have seen. So this last slide is just kind of a summary of, Petsmart Charities overall. As Steve said, $31.1 million invested annually. That number continues to grow year over year. We have partnered with 3,000 animal welfare agencies, invested $285 million since inception. We aren't going anywhere. I know there was a lot of questions when all of this transition happened, so this sort of is confirmation that we are here. We're here to say we're continuing to find so much now than ever before. Definitely take advantage of these types of grants. We also want to say I stepped into this position really humbly, recognizing that there's a lot of work that had come before us in building Petsmart Charities and building it to be able to have this slide. So I have a lot of respect for those individuals, and I know that probably you had some good relationships with those folks, and just have to commend that before we move forward. But I think there's last time for a few minutes of Q&A. Yes.
So, our organization has 3 spay and neuter programs in 3 different counties. Would we be allowed to apply for spay and neuter grants for different programs?
Mm-hmm.
So, if I have a program in Snohomish County, I can apply for a grant for that one, and one in King County, I can apply for that one. Okay.
Yeah, you can have multiple grants. We will look for one to sort of be wrapping up if it's in the same general area, so that we have that impact report, so we have that evaluation tool before we'll issue a new one. So not necessarily concurrent grants for the same area, but you can have multiple grants at one time with Petsmart Charities, depending, all levels of funding.
What about event sponsorship?
So we do occasionally do
Okay.
event sponsorship.
Doesn't really fit into any of those, so I wasn't sure.
It's really only for very, very large scale
Okay.
community events, multiple partners.
Okay.
The smaller ones would typically run through Petsmart Inc. They do some support
Okay.
for smaller events, but in general, sponsorship is not something that we can sort of play
Great.
very much. Yes.
Do you have a copy of your PowerPoint?
Yes, I think we can follow up with one. I know.
Yeah, I'll send it.
I think we're being recorded, so you can certainly get a copy for us.
Yes, I'd like to share it.
Yeah, please. Please do.
I want to thank you guys for coming to present to us. I have a meeting with them at 3 o'clock, 40 miles over.
Well, thank you.
Good luck on that.
Well, and I think we'll be up here for a few minutes if anyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.